Hello and welcome to the final episode of this series of Waypoint, the AirMed&Rescue podcast. It's almost time to wrap up, but before we head off for the summer, let's look back at some of the highlights of the year so far. Thanks again to all our guests, Michael Bakari and Sam Sharp of Leonardo, Charlie Szymanski of ICAR, Hans Eric of Atlantic Airways, Flightcell International's Hakan Osterhed, Michael Benton of VY Klein, Paul Daly of the Western Australia Police Air Wing, and Krista Genmark of Velox Group. In episode 1, we spoke to Michael Bakari and Sam Sharp of Leonardo. You mentioned that people will adapt their aircraft and over the years, and you'll see them evolve and things like that. That seems like it's not to say a lot of pressure, but like in order to create something that can work in that way, it must be quite hard to sort of create an interior that can work as a sort of blank canvas in that sense.
Yeah, it is, and I think sometimes it's something that's difficult for the clinical teams to sort of wrap their head around. I know my previous job when I was working as a nurse, you kind of look at your current problems and try to address those, but that anticipation of future flexibility is not always there. So I spend a lot of time working with them about introducing and creating flexibility, and all of our interior partners are really incredible about this. They've also from an engineering standpoint and a design standpoint tried to work that in, because everyone knows that medicine is moving faster than helicopters in terms of new designs and stuff like that, right? If you would have asked me if we would have flown ECMO 10 years ago, I would have said you were crazy, and now there's people doing it all over the place. But yeah, it is a challenge. I think it's more of a mental challenge than it is kind of an engineering one. It's just sort of being open to this flexibility, because there's a lot of times that they say, I want the trash can right here because that's exactly where I'm going to always want the trash can. And needless to say, the trash can usually gets moved a couple of times.
We also have what we call assets that are mock-ups that are essentially a blank canvas of an interior. And we have, as an example, our AW169 that we bring down to these customers and just give it to them for a week and a half with the seats, the stretcher that they would like, and allow them to kind of say, oh, this works well, or this doesn't work well, because they have an idea of what needs to happen. But going from product X to product Y, it may not flow completely. So we have the assets there that I'll say, here, go ahead, play with it, kind of figure out what you're thinking from an interior perspective. Sam will also be there as well to help facilitate or answer any of the questions. So it's also, I would say that is another avenue that we as Leonardo like to provide for our customers here too, to help facilitate, understand what that blank canvas can actually do.
How close is the mock-up to the sort of final version usually? Is it?
So our blank mock-up, we have a floor on it. We have some seats that you can maneuver around. You put the, depending on what stretcher you want, if you have your own stretcher, if you have a Furno or a Striker, you just have that ability to put it into the mock-up and see, how does it work? Do we want to go transversal? Do we want to go longitudinal? Where do we want to store our bags? How do we want to put the seats? How is installing or putting in the stretcher, if it is a power load, with what kind of seats do we need to have in there? So it does add a nice level of capability, again, to start painting that blank canvas, if you will.
And I was just going to add that, this kind of ties into what Mike said about the relationship is really important to us. And it's important to us throughout our whole organization. So if we just, gave them a catalog and said, pick out a helicopter and here's a couple layouts and went on their way, I don't think that would meet their mission needs very well. And so not only myself and the sales team, but also sales engineering, we had one of our customers over in Italy with probably 15 engineers, chief test pilots in the room, really understanding what their mission is, what their challenges are. They operate in a very austere environment with some really low temps and really long distances. So it's important to us to have that relationship so that we have the best understanding of what they need and then we can help provide them with the aircraft that's able to do as much as possible. There's still we haven't figured out how to get rid of physics, but we try our best.
In episode 2, we talked to Charlie Szymanski of ICAR.
Charlie, can you share a quick potted history of your career in the air rescue sector?
I started more than 30 years ago as a volunteer in search and rescue in Colorado here in the USA. I, for all those years, have been a member of the Alpine Rescue Team in Colorado. We're one of the busiest rescue teams in Colorado and, for that matter, in the United States. Last year alone, we performed 172 search and rescue operations. When I first joined Alpine more than 30 years ago, we performed about 30 rescues each year. So when you consider that this last year we had 172 operations, you can see the growth in backcountry activity, rescue activity in Colorado. What I really want to share about my history in search and rescue was one particular search that we had back in my early days of my SAR career. It was my 4th year, I think, in search and rescue. And I just happened to be the incident commander one day on what became the largest search in Colorado history. It was a week-long search for a missing hiker. Wow. And tragically, during that search, we had an aviation-related crash and line of duty death. It was a moment I'll never forget. And after that day, and in memory of our pilot, Terry Leedens, who died sadly in that crash, I dedicated myself to helicopter rescue aviation safety. I realized in the week that followed, or weeks or months, maybe I guess I should say years that followed that crash and Terry's death, that I needed personally more aviation safety training. And in fact, over time, I realized we all needed more aviation, helicopter in particular, safety training. So shortly after that crash, I started volunteering with our local helicopter EMS HEMS provider, which is called Flight for Life here in Colorado. But the most important thing I discovered when I took shifts with Flight for Life on volunteer, what we would call ride-alongs in those early days, was that there was no backcountry helicopter rescue training guidebooks. This was even before the internet, so not even anything online, of course. And none of these things existed. And I complained about that to 2 pilots, one from Flight for Life and another pilot I'd flown with. And I was like, there's no training materials. How do people learn if there's no training materials? And both of them said at the same time, well, Charlie, let's sit down and write them. And so that sort of unintentionally became where my focus has been over the last 30 plus years. It became the start of what for me has been 25 years of developing helicopter rescue training with the Mountain Rescue Association here in the US. And now some 10 years after we put our guidebooks online, when the internet first came along, we especially started to put everything online. Yeah. Now we have more than 11,000 students enrolled in our courses, and we're super excited about that. And as I finish this answer, the long-winded answer to your question about my background, if I may, I want to put a shameless plug in for that training, which I know you all have featured in the AirMed&Rescue magazine. The online training for the MRA on helicopter rescue and a few other topics is free to anyone to enroll, anyone on the planet, as long as you have an email address for a confirmation email, can take our courses. They're available at the MRA website, which is www.training.mra.org. And we're just super excited now that thousands and thousands of rescuers have taken these courses. Some rescue teams require these courses of their rescue team members. So anyways, I hope that gives you some sense of where I've spent my time in SAR in the past 30 plus years. And as I mentioned, most of it just around safety education and what do we do to make sure we know what we need to know in this work of search and rescue, helicopter search and rescue.
In episode 3, we spoke to Hans-Erik of Atlantic Airways.
Right, Hans-Erik, do you have a most memorable rescue that you've ever done in your career? What's going to stay with you?
I have done so many rescues. I remember once I was called by the Danish Navy to do a medical transport for them because they had some technical issues. And this Navy vessel was there trying to get us down on deck. There was so much fog, and I remember I came to this place and I took this young girl on board, and she had some hemorrhage and in the brain, and she was in real bad conditions. And I remember when I took off that her mother came running up to the helicopter with all kinds of medicine from the ambulance, and the doctor shouted at me, "Just fly, fly, just fly, take off, fly." And I took off, and the mother was almost blown away. And I went to Tórshavn, to the main hospital, and there was fog. There was no chance to land there. And this was after work one day when I was off, and they called me, and there was one little tiny spot that I knew of. Just about Tórshavn, the capital Tórshavn, where usually there is no fog. So I tried to land there, and there was no fog in this little tiny spot, and I got the ambulance up there. I remember the head stewardess of Atlantic Airways called me a few days later and told me, there was a young girl with the airplane today. And she said that she had been very ill, and they had to drill a hole in her head, in order to get the blood out. And she had told her that if the helicopter hadn't come there exactly when it did, she would not sit there. She would have perished. And that is the one I remember the most. And also, I'm very grateful in a way to this head stewardess of Atlantic Airways that she called me and told me this, because I was really concerned about this young girl, because I felt so sorry for this mother, that she had to stay back. But I have also been out at burning vessels where we took 10 people out of a burning vessel, where this committee, this disaster or whatever they call it, this committee called me a few days later and told me that this same vessel that was burning actually exploded only 10 or 15 minutes after we took the last person on board. So, but there are so many others. But strangely enough, I remember most this incident, most likely because of her mother.
Yeah. Amazing that you got to find out what happened as well. I guess there are a lot of rescues where you deliver a patient to hospital and you never actually hear the outcome.
Quite often you wonder if they survived or not. Sometimes I hear it. Here the society is quite small. Sometimes I hear people talk about these people we have rescued, and sometimes I hear just sitting there at a birthday party or something, and they talk about this incident, and they say, "Oh, now he is okay now," and so on. So that is how small our society is, But I never interfere in the talk. I never say anything. I just sit there and listen. So you get it back somehow.
In episode 4, we spoke to Hakan Osterhed of Flightcell International.
So what role does Flightcell play, specifically when it comes to special missions operators? How does having the world's smallest communication system or integrated flight data, audio and video recording system benefit people in aerial firefighting, medical, search and rescue or law enforcement?
Yeah, so the original Flightcell product, so our focus have very much been on the cell, so Flightcell. And the original product, which was an idea from our founder, John Wiley, was to, he's a helicopter pilot. He wanted to listen to his iPhone music, the iPhone or whatever when he was flying. So he actually built the box that puts into the headset, and then you can plug in, so the box connects to the intercom, you plug in both the headset and the phone to that. And so that's actually integrated cellular into the craft. So, and obviously we started out with cellular very early, and the cell networks haven't really been designed for an helicopter traveling at altitude. It's designed for the phone. So there are some challenges there, and we've been learning and taking on this challenging and developing our products over time to be able to use the cell data capability. We also do the voice, but more and more we see obviously the data is the requirement, and obviously the cost benefit of using cell data as compared to satellite is it's huge. I think that has positioned us really well in the market, because cell wasn't an add-on to something, an afterthought. For us, it's always been there, always. We basically see satellite as a fallback. Obviously, over time, we have developed and improved our satellite capability also, and we do have customers who use our products with only satellite capability, but we actually do have customers that use our products with only cellular capabilities today, so you can have two modems that fall back on each other, etc. So I think this has helped us positioning in markets. So like 80% of our customer base is operating on helicopters. Those altitudes make them very suitable for cellular communications. And as the mission, they get more and more advanced equipment on board that needs to interconnect. We offer that through a Wi-Fi interface or a wired Ethernet interface to the equipment they have on board, really. So really to any equipment they have on board, it's an easy integration with our device. So I think that have helped us position ourselves in the special mission kind of operations.
In episode 5, we talked to Michael Benton of V-Wide Climb.
Thanks for joining us, Michael. As you say, I think sometimes when people are too close to their own organisation, they don't always see where efficiencies or enhancements could be made. So it takes coming in with fresh eyes, and also those fresh eyes, as you say, that have seen how other people have done it. And you take that example and you can implement it somewhere else to really affect positive change.
Yeah. And it's, we call it like the phrase, the low-hanging fruit. Is often you come in and you kind of hit those quick and get some early wins, some quick successes. And like you said, it's the problem is, or the challenge is that when they're so close to it, it's the way they've always done it.
Yeah.
And it works. So they're like, why do we want to change it? Why do we want to make extra work to change something? Right. And we're always big to say that, what we recommend, we're not ever recommending what we think is necessarily this is the best way to do it. It's just a different way. Because it may be best for this organization in California, but not the best way to do it for another organization in, say, Western Australia, right? It's a very different set of circumstances for both.
Sure. And when it comes to the crews that you're working with in there, what do you do on the sort of with the personnel on the front line?
Yeah, that's, I think, maybe one of the things that makes us a little more unique. And I think probably every consulting company says they're unique, right? But I think what makes us a little unique is we're not afraid to take the time to spend one-on-one time with individual crew members. Okay. So if we're doing a full assessment of an organization, it's nearly impossible to get 100% of staff, but we'll spend quite a bit of time one-on-one with line staff, right? So everywhere from maintenance technicians to clinicians, pilots, winch operator or hoist operators, to really hear their input. Because what we're trying to do is measure, we have kind of a quantitative and qualitative set of questions that we go through. Yeah. And the leadership team at the highest level, they get the same questions that we ask even the lowest level staff. Right. And what we're trying to illustrate is if there's a gap, right? So a great example is morale. If you ask all of the leadership team and they say morale is 5 out of 5, it's as good as it can ever be. You can imagine when you go to the line level, you may not get that same response. You may get 2, 2.5. So we dig deeper on that and provide that feedback back to the leadership team with recommendations on making it better. I think one thing that's important is whenever we do these projects, I'd say one of our most important principles is about confidentiality. So right from the beginning, if we're having negotiations on a contract with, say, a CEO, is we just tell them straight out, look, if you ask who said something, then you're not in the right mindset to fix this, right? Because this isn't about individual, issues.
In episode 6, we talked to Paul Daly of the Western Australia Police Air Wing. Western Australia obviously has an area of, I think, 2.5 million square kilometres or roughly thereabouts. And as you say, most of the population, 80%, I think you said, is all down in the Perth region in the southwest. So, and the rest is largely empty, obviously not completely empty. You've got the mining companies, you've got various, native groups and things like that. But so how do you manage to police the whole state?
We will go anywhere that's required. Logistically, that presents some challenges. However, we have our fuel caches all over the state. So if we have to do our refills along the way, our PC-12s and our helicopters integrate. We can do off-wing refueling, if you like. So we can send a PC-12 out to meet the helicopter, refuel from that and send it off to get more. We have fuel trucks that we can send with it, depending where the area operations are. And really, it's just a logistical exercise as to who needs to go where and why, but we will do it. That's our mandate. I have a commissioner who has given an undertaking that the people out in the far reaches of our state deserve and expect just the same level of service as those in the metropolitan area where all our specialist units are. So really it's a non-negotiable, and it can be a very fine juggling act sometimes, particularly when that unpredictable nature of policing hits us and there's all sorts of things going on at once. Then it becomes a real challenge for my operations managers to work out who's going where and when.
So if someone was looking to, say a young person was looking to get into police aviation as a career, what advice would you give them?
Get a good grounding in police work. You need to understand the business on the ground before you try and assist it from the air. It sounds glamorous, but it involves a lot of hard work. There aren't hundreds of jobs going. So if you are going to fixate on to, I just want to do that, either be prepared to spend a long time waiting, or when you do get an opportunity, you might not get in. Everyone needs a plan B, C, D. So it's incredibly rewarding. I say we've got the best seat, the best front row seat to the biggest show in town. Because if it's happening on the ground, we're in the air over and above it, and we can do our business. But it's a niche skill. It certainly gives you all the tickets, all the skills and experience that allows you to flourish in that aviation industry. Because it's not just police, it could be a rescue helicopter or fire and emergency services. They have their helicopters. And various rescue organisations around the world even, that gives you a very, very niche skill, but it's difficult to get into. Jobs don't come up all that often. I only have 25 tactical flight officers with me here, and we service all of Western Australia, and every 8 years or so they're turning over. So it's not like there's every year you're going to run a course and you're going to get lots of people in. But if aviation's your passion and you're a police officer and you're fortunate enough to do it, there's like no place like it. I certainly don't have a staff or an HR problem here. Everyone is highly motivated. Everyone wants to come to work. They all want to fly. My biggest challenge sometimes is just pulling on that chain and saying, I've got to balance this against the budget, fellas. And so, it's just not unlimited flight time. So, what a nice problem to have.
And in episode 7, we spoke to Krista Genmark of the Velox Group. It's incredible, isn't it? I was reading about these days, you can detect a fault while the aircraft is still in flight, and then everyone can be ready for it on the runway to haul it in to fix the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Solve that problem. Get that straight into your maintenance system, and also having that connected to your scheduling system, knowing that this aircraft, it's going to need some time on the ground. So what does that mean for our scheduling? And what does that mean for that crew that was attached to that aircraft? So the more you can connect these pieces, the more streamlined it gets, and the more simplified it gets for the people behind the scenes sitting in the operations room, right, to make sure that they can have the aircraft at the right place at the right time, and finally get to the right place and land safely.
Yeah, that's true of every part of aviation, but it's especially true, I suppose, for the kind of stuff that we write about, which is the sort of special missions stuff, the police, aviation, firefighting, air medevac, all those kind of things, because they're always more likely to be called up more frequently, and they're more likely to do extreme kind of movements.
Yeah. You have a mission where you definitely need to focus on more important things. The more that can be automated for you in the background, and the less time you have to spend on necessary admin work, the better you can perform your actual task. And it's also probably in many situations under very stressful conditions, right? And for example, as I mentioned, living in Southern California, we trust these pilots and aircraft to always be available at the time when we need them. If you look at the fires up in LA, it happens extremely fast, right? So to prevent similar situations, those aircrafts needs to be out there in a very short period of time, right? To stop it from spreading. And then you need to know that you have a crew that is actually current and that can fly. You need to know that you have an aircraft that is up to par with the mission and can take off immediately. Then while you have all these aircrafts out there, you can track them and see how they perform, and also identify if we're doing something that is not safe, so they can actually come back, take off again, and continue doing this without having any serious incidents.
And that's it for this series of Waypoint, the AirMed&Rescue podcast. Thank you again to all our guests, to the Waypoint team, and most of all to you, our listeners. We couldn't do it without you. We'll be back again later this year for a third series. But if you can't wait until then, be sure to check out the AirMed&Rescue website for more great news and analysis on the special mission sector. Until then, safe flying.